Hi again then guys, and welcome to another installment of Ultimate Exotics, once again taking a look back to the days of Gran Turismo 2 for yet another exclusive supercar, in this case a supercar concept, which Gran Turismo has never featured since. And with some of the supercars, you could say maybe we don't need them. Others though, it's a real tragedy that they weren't featured after Gran Turismo 2, and I would say that this is one of those, because this is a car which is very significant to the Ford brand. As far as I know, it's still the fastest non-race car that Ford has ever made, at around 235 miles per hour, the Ford GT90. Of course, inspired by its spiritual predecessor, the GT40, but the GT90 goes down much more a futuristic sci-fi route as far as the visuals go. The front end definitely has ties to the GT40, the grille, the projector headlamps at the lower end of the bumper. Again, they're very inspired by the GT40, even the overall shape has some similarities. But with the GT90, the design of the car is very much inspired by triangles. If you look over the vehicle, there are a lot of triangular shapes. The most obvious one, of course, being the exhaust, which looks fantastic. Probably one of the coolest exhausts since, or actually in this case before, the Pagani Zonda, that central mounted, very eye-catching centerpiece really of the rear end design. Now, as far as the technical side of things, this car has got a lot to offer. It's a 6-litre turbocharged engine, technically a 5.9, mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, and it's putting out some serious numbers. 716 horsepower, 663 pound-feet of torque. And it's not even that heavy either, 1452 kilos, and that, considering that you can't do anything to it at all. This is a non-tunable car. So to have a curb weight which is already that low, that's actually pretty good. That's a lot lighter, for instance, than the Lamborghini Murcielago would be, a lot lighter than the SLR would be. So overall, that's nothing to be sniffed at. As far as price, well, that's the thing. It doesn't have one on Gran Turismo 2. This is one of those cars which you have to unlock. And as I have mentioned before, and I know some of you guys agree with this, I would personally love to see that aspect of older Gran Turismo games return. Because now we're in an era where you can basically just buy your way to the top. And although that's unfortunately a little bit uncomfortably similar to real life, on a game, you almost want something to work towards. You don't want to gear a game in such a way that a casual gamer can just get everything if you have enough cash. Maybe you do, personally I don't. Maybe it's because I come up from the generation that played these games where you had to unlock stuff, and it felt like more of an occasion when you did so, when the car would have that typical blacked out silhouette, or on some games maybe even a cover, like a tarp, strung over the car. When you didn't know what it was, you'd have to unlock it. And even if you did know what it was, like in the case of Gran Turismo 2, you couldn't just buy the vehicle, you had to actually attain it. It makes it feel like more of an occasion, and that's certainly the case with the GT90. Now, in terms of track potential, I have to admit I gave this car short thrift before I'd driven it again for this review, because I bought it on the game, or rather won it, and then drove it a little bit, but I remembered it having much worse handling than it actually does. And I think a reason why I was thinking that is because in real life, Jeremy Clarkson drove this car and said that it was the worst handling car he'd ever driven. It was almost impossible to take a corner at high speed. And in real life, that's probably true, because at the end of the day, even with the development put into it, it is at the end of the day a glorified show car. It's not designed to break lap records, it's a concept car. So of course concept cars don't have as much development, especially track hours put in to develop that side of them. They're more about how a potential production car could look, or the performance which it could have, or technology which it will showcase. Initially though, it's basically just a show car, and you can feel that with this one. You can feel that with some others on Gran Turismo 2 as well, like the Chrysler Phaeton. But in this case, it's actually better than I remembered, because when I drove it again a couple of days ago for this review, I actually realised it's not a bad handling car. You can spin out with it, of course, but it's actually more difficult to do so than I'd remembered. And as long as you keep it relatively smooth, as far as throttle control, steering, that kind of stuff, it will actually give you some pretty decent lap times. So unlike some other concept or prototype supercars, this is actually a vehicle potentially on Gran Turismo 2 which you could even use under some racing circumstances to take on, for instance, LM cars or touring cars. It won't necessarily destroy everything in its way, because still, against a race car, the weight is reasonably high, but it does have the sheer straight line power, which, of course, if you use it on the right track, can prove to be a very valuable asset to have. So the GT90 is not as disappointing as I remembered it being. It's actually a lot better than I'd previously given it credit for. My memory was wrong when it comes to this car. Either way though, even when I did think it was bad, this was still one of my favourite cars from Gran Turismo 2, and that hasn't changed. I love the GT90. As I record this video, I've literally got a model car of it sitting right next to me, so of course I love this car. In fact, my model car of it is sitting right next to a Lotus Elise GT1, and the other side is a pink, or rather purple, first generation TVR Cerberus Speed 12 concept. Gran Turismo 2 has tons of cars, which I love, tons of cars which should be brought back, and I think this is a prime example of one which would fit in really well. Maybe not on GT Sport. The game is, of course, much more predominantly geared towards more modern vehicles, but on Gran Turismo 5 or 6, this car could have had a really nice place. But maybe beyond Gran Turismo Sport, it could potentially come back. We'll have to wait and see. But that's it overall for this particular review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.